Every day you wait, you procrastinate and you paralyse the organisation and you paralyse vision moving forward.
If we call ourselves a Christian, why wouldn't we be kingdom-minded in the way that we do business?
I think it's really important to protect kingdom goals because I think the kingdom goals bring an organisation out of the ordinary into the extraordinary.
Welcome to the Lions Roar podcast. We are with you on your entrepreneurial journey, and we're here to discuss the topics that are going to help inspire you. Today, we are joined by some special guests. We have Shell Perris, she is the Lions coordinator, and we've got Gary Spicer, who is the executive director of Imagine the Day Ministries. So thanks for joining me today, guys. We are talking about kingdom-orientated business goals. So is it important to build your business around God's purpose or just your personal plans?
Well, I think first of all, we have to answer that. The person that's kind of leading the business or the organisation. Firstly, do we want it around our plans or do we want it around his plans? And I think that then starts to determine how we put together goals, how we put together ambitions, dreams. And I think the important thing is, I've always thought, if you're doing a business, an organisation, a ministry, my whole thing is, how does this impact people's lives?
Yeah.
Not am I just trying to sell a product, not am I just trying to run a successful business, but one day when I get to heaven, you know, I believe God will ask the question and I want to hear the whole thing, well done, thy good and faithful servant. Now, I think I'd only hear that if I was doing something for him and not just for me.
Yeah.
And so kingdom goals come out of the whole motivation is, I want to live to please him. I want to build something he's proud of. And I want it to affect people's lives for the positive. And so transformational goals are really important. And even if we're giving someone a product, our motive shouldn't be profit. It should be transformational.
Yeah.
And I think that really helps determine when we're weighing up goals. Now, how is this going to change people's lives? How much is it going to challenge people's lives? And how much is it going to improve people's lives? And I think that really starts to bring the kingdom in, because the kingdom isn't just about making money. Kingdom's about lives changed. You know, Jesus didn't die that we'd be rich. He died that people would be saved. That people's lives would be transformed. And so when we're talking about business, I always think, you know, it's game. I can sell whatever product I want, but the leader and the owner's, I guess, responsibility is to determine, is this going to be kingdom or is my kingdom on Sunday? And then Monday, it's me.
Yeah. One of our values as the Lions is we are kingdom minded. And, you know, we're really, really hot on this in terms of when we have delegates on the programme, they come with a project, they come with an idea. And some of those are businesses, some are charities, some are social enterprises. Some of them are really impactful when it comes to humanitarian aid or social impact. But still our question is, but where's the kingdom? Where's the kingdom? Because there's a difference between having a social impact with your project, for a positive social impact, and a kingdom impact. And I think it's really important that people understand the difference between the two. You know, your project or your business might impact people's lives in a positive way. You know, so it might help homeless people to get off the streets. It might help children to, you know, be fed in different parts of the world. But how is it kingdom? How is it pointing people to Jesus? How are lives being transformed for the kingdom? And my argument would be that if we love Jesus and if we follow Jesus and if we call ourselves a Christian, why wouldn't we be kingdom minded in the way that we do business? Why wouldn't we be kingdom minded in the way that we're going to set up an organisation? Because if it flows in us and through us, if Jesus is flowing through us and in us, then surely that should flow through our business and project. It doesn't mean that we have to have a Christian business, you know, or anything like that. But there are ways that we can build that kingdom mindedness into any project, into any business, into any charity. And use it as an opportunity to point people towards
I
Jesus.
think it also takes the goals away from the secular to the spiritual.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it's important to have secular goals like how many products I'm going to sell, what's my profitability, what's the cost of the business. We need to do all that.
Yeah.
But in the midst of it, the core needs to be, you know, perhaps we can have some goals going alongside that, you know, testimonials, how their lives have been changed that we even put on our website. You know, even with selling a product, and I don't mean just practical change, but, you know, when we do Lions, you know, we always sometimes say, well, okay, you're selling a product, but why don't you point people to a website that tells the real core reason you're doing this?
Yeah.
So you sometimes don't have to be blatant, but you do have to be purposeful.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And, you know, if we say, well, you know, I'm doing a good business, so God will bless it.
Yeah.
I think God does bless good businesses. He blesses good hearts. But the issue is, what is our kingdom goals within the business or within the organization? And that has to be built around lives change, transformation, people coming to know Jesus, people seeking him out. That somehow we've been appointed. We may not be the end destination, but we've been a pointer towards people seeking out truth.
What happens though when we set goals and we think that they are God's goals, but actually it doesn't really align with his plan?
You know, I mean, I think that's a hard one really, because sometimes we discover on the journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes we have to make, dare I say, alterations to where we're going. And I think we've always got to be flexible, to have an ear to hear what he's saying. And so I think the promptings of God come to us on our journey, and we need to have an ear. So, okay, he told us to start something, but we may have deviated a bit. And I think we have to have an ear to hear, kind of like, you know, Gary, this is good, but for it to be great and great in his kingdom,
Yeah.
you know, you need to make a bit of an alteration here or a motivation.
And it's an ear to hear, but then a heart to follow. Because it's one thing hearing God and having that sense of maybe this isn't the right thing. It's another thing doing something about it.
Yeah.
And actually that's the bit that needs to happen, is that when we feel like there's maybe a change in direction that's needed, or we've made a decision about something that's not working out quite the way we expected it to, or, you know, God says in the middle of something, actually, I want you to do it this way. We've then got to act on that. And that's where relationship with God comes in. That's where hearing God's voice and being humble enough to go, okay, God, let's do it your way.
I think that's where procrastination takes place.
Right.
I think where people don't like to admit they may have got something wrong. I'm on about a leader.
Yeah.
I'm on about a pioneer. And they don't want to tell people they haven't quite got it right. And so they procrastinate. And I think that's the worst thing people can do. Because procrastination paralyzes an organization.
Yeah.
Paralyzes the purposes of God. And so, you know, we need courageous leadership. So people, when they have that prompting, don't need to delay. They need to get on with it. Openly say, you know, I think, you know, we started this way, you know, we've created this, but we've actually been deviated by making some of these decisions. And again, you know, the honesty of leadership is really important. If we want something to be kingdom, I haven't got it right most of the time, but admitting you've not got it right and then doing something about it and being courageous is really important. And if people aren't courageous, people listening today, if you're thinking you're in a situation, you think, I've got to alter something, I'll wait. Don't wait. Because every day you wait, you procrastinate and you paralyze the organization and you paralyze vision moving forward. And suddenly it becomes an institution rather than, you know, the whole thing of an alive organization.
Yeah.
And once something institutionalized, you know, it crystallizes.
Yeah.
And then it becomes hard, rigid, and you can't change yourself, you can't change the people, you can't change the direction. And something that started off well with kingdom in mind now just becomes an institution that has some God label on it maybe, but it's doing nothing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I was just going to say that one of the other goals of the Lions is that we are courageous.
Yeah.
And I was preparing a talk on this.
Here, well,
You are. I was preparing a talk a few months ago for an event that we were doing about that value of we are courageous and what it means to live courageously and be courageous. And one of the things that I discovered whilst I was planning that talk was the word lion-hearted means extraordinarily courageous. And I love that. And it's really something that God's spoken to me about over the last couple of months, is what it is to be lion-hearted in our leadership, what it is to be lion-hearted in the way that we approach situations, to be extraordinarily courageous.
Yeah.
And sometimes that means going against the flow. And sometimes that means standing up for things that you know are the right thing to stand up for. And sometimes it means being courageous in the way that we deal with people, and in the way that we deal with protecting culture, and in the way that we deal with direction and vision and all of those different things. But my prayer as a leader over the last couple of months is, God, help me to be lion-hearted, and obviously with the fact that I lead the Lions, it was a beautiful thing that God's just been speaking to me about. But anybody listening today, I'm like, be lion-hearted in the way that we lead. When it comes to those, I can't even say the word, kingdom-orientated goals, let's be lion-hearted in the way that we set those, rather than setting goals that are almost in our own strength, things that we feel comfortable with, things that, sound good or look good on paper. It's being lion-hearted in the way that we set those kingdom goals and kingdom values. And I always find that, when it's something that you feel like you can do in your own strength, that's one thing. But when you feel like you're doing something, whether that's setting a value or planning something or a direction of travel, when you're doing that and you think, I can't do this on my own, that's the sweet spot.
Yeah.
That's the place where God really intervenes and does something amazing. Because when we can't, when we get to the end of ourselves, that's when God's given permission to take over. And I know that when I think about the events that I've planned with Alive, which is obviously the other bit of Imagine the Day that I kind of lead as well as the Lions, I've done events where I've got to the end of it and I've thought, that was a great event, but I was able to do that all in my own strength. I have the ability to do that. The events that I've got to the end of and thought, there is absolutely no way on this planet that could have happened without God. They're the moments where I know that it's a kingdom-focused, kingdom-minded event that's happened.
Right.
It's a God thing.
Yeah.
It's not just a good thing, it's a God thing.
I think it's really important to protect kingdom goals. Because I think the kingdom goals bring an organisation out of the ordinary into the extraordinary, out of the natural into the supernatural. And, also kingdom takes the moment and turns it into eternal.
Yeah.
And I think, what gets me excited about running any organisation in my life, I'm involved in leading work into schools, secular schools, bringing the message in. And there's a lot of secular challenges. But what really excites me is the kingdom goals that we have for that organisation. Lives transformed, knowing that eternity can be altered through what we're doing. But the big thing I've got to protect is the kingdom goals, because it can be easily become a secular goal orientated organisation.
Yeah.
It could be education set as goals. Now, it's not that we ignore them. We get on with them. We're very professional. But what really excites me is the kingdom goals, which bring eternal values into people's lives and challenges. And I think, we should be about eternity today. We should be thinking eternity today in everything we do. And I think that whole kingdom orientated goals helps us keep that natural into the supernatural.
Yeah.
The ordinary into the extraordinary. And I'll tell you what, it's extraordinary and the supernatural, what gets me out of bed every morning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not the normal, trivial running an organisation.
Yeah. Amazing. So, we're talking to entrepreneurs who are on their journey. So how do you set kingdom goals from the very beginning of your journey? How do you do that?
I mean, there's loads of ways. I think you start with prayer. I think you write your ideas down and you submit them to God. We know that the Bible says that God has good plans to prosper us, not to harm us.
Yeah.
And so I think it's getting in tune and in line with God's plans, so that our desires and God's desires and our plans and God's plans match up, that they're not different. That's the first thing. And the only way of doing that is through prayer, through taking time, making space. If you're busy doing things all the time, you're not going to have that space that's needed to be able to set those kingdom goals and kingdom values. So that's one good place to start.
I think when we're saved, we're not just saved for heaven, we're saved for his purpose. And I think, for all Christians, when they get saved, it's not like, oh, I've just to be good now. It's like, what is his purpose on my life? What did he birth me for?
Yeah.
And that ties into natural talent.
Yeah.
Ties into our natural desires. But we're too often saying, God, bless my plans. And I want to connect into what his purpose is on my life. Funnily enough, I've just been preaching this weekend, and I was asked to preach on a film. I'm not a film bot, but it took me back to one of the great classics, Chariots of Fire, and actually showed a clip of it. And a guy called Eric Liddell, who's 22 years old, Scottish. They called him the Scottish Scottish. I forgot what he called him now, but anyway, he was a fast boy. And he was 22, and he was going to run in the 1924 Olympics. And we got to the Olympics, and he found out just a few days that the 100 meters that he was going to run was going to be run on a Sunday. And the point is, true story. Point was, he then realized it was a conviction of his not to be seen to run. It was the Lord's day. Now, we've probably lost that a bit today. And some of that I think is a shame, if I'm honest, because we've not only lost Sunday, we've lost the Sabbath, which we do need, all of us. But in the midst of that, he couldn't run. He decided not to run. It seemed like all his dreams are over, but then the Olympic Committee decided to ask him to run the 400, which he hadn't trained for. But in the midst of it, he goes, okay, I'll run it. All the way to the final, he broke the world record 3 times that he'd not practiced for. And the purpose of him running the 400 was that he just chose not to run his purpose, but God's purpose.
Yeah. And
the thing was, he won the 400 meters gold. And, he became such a well-known person who stood on his conviction, loved God. The whole testimony went across the world. But the issue was, 2 years later, he gave up running and went to China to be a missionary, which he always said was his call, his purposes on his life. And he went out there, got married, had children, and served for 22 years on the mission field, going to the rural places of China. And today, after many people came to know the Lord, obviously he's died now, but what happened was there's a monument in China that gives gratitude for him bringing the gospel to that nation. In Edinburgh, where he went to the Edinburgh University, there's a statue and a monument of that he stood on his conviction. And I think I say that story because it may be totally different what we stand on today. But we've got to remember we were born for his purposes, to run his race.
Yeah.
And that can be in business, it can be in the marketplace, it doesn't have to be in the pulpit. But we are representatives of Jesus and the gospel wherever we are.
Yeah.
And if we can keep that right at the centre of our hearts and our minds, we'll be kingdom people and we'll make kingdom goals.
Yeah.
And we'll make an eternal impact.
Yeah. I mean, Gary, you oversee so many different projects under ITD. And I know there's a particular project at the moment that you're working on that has been a very long journey. So, when that project, I'm sure you're going to tell us about it, but that project was born, obviously kingdom mindset was from the very beginning, but how do you keep that going when the journey takes so long?
Yeah, well, I think you're talking about the Eternal Wall of Prayer, which we're getting very close to signing contracts, actually, so it will be built. But this dream was not given me. It was given another man called Richard Gamble, and it was given him 18 years ago. And obviously he's carried this dream. And I'm sure when he was given it, he didn't think it was going to take 18 years to get to this point.
Yeah.
So one thing we've got to be is patient.
Yeah.
I'm not a patient.
No, nor am I.
Anybody that knows me, I'm not a patient. But I didn't know about it 18 years ago. I knew about it about 7 or 8 years ago.
Yeah.
It was brought to my attention. And I looked at that project and I thought, this is fantastic. The Eternal Wall of Prayer, 1 million bricks, representing 1 million answered prayers. That people could point a phone out to each brick and read a person's testimony, healing, salvation, prayer in families, all sorts. Historic prayers about our nation being rescued, even world wars and things like that. And so I looked at this and I thought, this is God. This is kingdom. But 7 or 8 years on, probably for me, I never realised it was going to take this long to get this far.
Yeah.
It's quite a lot of money. But besides that, it's a lot of technicality. There's a lot of challenge. And I think one of the things, I've had to learn is when God gives you something big that's kingdom, it's going to take time.
Yeah.
We can bless people quick, but it takes a lot longer to build something of significance, whatever our life represents. And so again, people listening today, if God's give you a big dream, it's going to take time.
Yeah.
And it's also going to, and God's asked you to build something, not just bless people. I'm not against blessing people, but the issue is when he's asked us to build something, it just takes so much time. There's a lot of curveballs. There's a lot of disappointment. There's a lot of delay.
Yeah.
And I think within that, we have to walk through that and keep our head high that God's asked us to do something. Kingdom goal of this, quite simply is that it will stand for 120 years. It'll be a testimony unto God, unto Jesus of answered prayers. And I feel that, this whole kingdom project won't give an answer, but will pose a question to the generations that come. What's that? Who's he? What's the church about? Who's Jesus? We live in such a secularized society today, and I'm not criticizing church. I've been a church pastor for over 35 years, but not everyone's going to walk into a church. But they may just see a monument as they fly into an airport, as they go past it on HS2, as they drive past it on the motorway. They might just look at this tall 153 feet monument, Mobius strip, go, what on earth is that? Well, they can go straight to Google, can't they?
Yeah.
And then they see it's an answered wall of prayer. And I just believe it creates a whole intrigue that people will ask questions, but it takes a long time. And who knows, who knows? I'll be in heaven not before it's built, thank God, but I'll be in heaven, and there'll still be people.
Yeah.
So it leaves a legacy. So kingdom leaves a legacy.
Yeah.
Not just a memory.
Yeah.
And it's been a journey in itself, hasn't it? Building the wall is a journey.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in fact, God is answering your prayers at every milestone of building this.
Yeah.
So it's quite...
Even while we're on this podcast, there's a very important meeting, just a few meters away.
Yeah.
With high level people trying to thrash out the final details and price of this whole project, and okay, you might say, well, why aren't you in that meeting? Well, I've got great people around me.
Yeah.
I've got experts around me. I don't need to be in that meeting. I need to be reported to about that meeting, but I don't need to be in everything.
Yeah.
And we've got, God's brought together some great people that can make this happen, but it takes a while to do that.
Yeah.
I do think that people forget that pioneering is hard work.
It is.
Pioneering something is so tough, and you have to have that grit and determination and resilience to keep going and to keep making the right decisions and to keep giving it to God, and I do, the danger is in pioneering that you can keep going and keep going and keep going. And in that keeping going, forget to give it to God.
Yeah.
And you have to give it to God on a daily basis, an hourly basis.
Yeah.
Sometimes even shorter time than that. You've got to keep giving it to God, because pioneering is hard. And if you do it in your own strength, you'll get nowhere fast.
I also think, we cannot be adrenaline seekers living off success.
Yeah.
When you're a pioneer, there's more disappointments than success.
Yes.
And, each day there's more challenges than answers.
Yeah.
And so you've got to have a resilience about you. First of all, that this isn't about my success. It's about God's purposes on my life. And I think that just demonstrates, again, his kingdom. I'm not here to represent me. I'm here to represent him. I've got to love the king enough to represent his kingdom.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes, people talk kingdom, but don't love the king.
Yeah.
And I've got to be honest, sometimes I have to go back to brass tacks and go, I'm doing this not for kingdom, because I love the king. And he's asked me to do it.
Yeah.
And they are, we all get dark days. I mean, Shell's exactly right. Pioneering is downright hard work. Sometimes you just live without success, or what might seem successful, not just days, weeks, sometimes months.
Yeah.
Breakthrough doesn't come quick or easy. We believe it's coming. That's why we keep going.
Yeah.
But we cannot live on the food and the fuel of success feelings, because as a pioneer, you don't get enough of it.
Yeah. And that's why you have to be lion-hearted. You have to be extraordinarily courageous in the way that you make decisions. You have to be extraordinarily courageous in the way that you love God, and in the way that you worship God, and in the choices that you make, and in the people that you appoint and bring to be part of what it is that God's called you to do. You have to be courageous in those things. You've got to be courageous in repentance when we get it wrong. And we've got to be courageous in, the way that we hope, and, the way that we deal with disappointment, all those things. It always takes more than you expect it to.
Yeah.
You think, oh yeah, this is going to be really hard work. It always ends up being harder than you think it's going to be. And that's why sometimes God doesn't always reveal the timing of things. He doesn't always, if he'd have said to you and Richard and the guys, with the wall at first, oh yeah, this is going to take 18 years and this is going to take all of this effort and energy, maybe they wouldn't have done it.
No.
There's things that I've been involved in that if God had shown me the whole thing at the word go, there's not a chance I would have done it, because it would have just felt like it was too much.
Yeah.
And so sometimes God just reveals those little steps, little bit by little bit, because there's things that he wants to teach us on the journey. And if he was to show us the whole path right from the word go, it'd be too much.
It'd be too much.
It got to be a bit weird as well. Let's be honest. I mean, Shell's weird. And the thing is,
yourself.
so part of the characteristic of being a pioneer is you've got to be a bit weird. You've got to be a bit crazy.
Yeah.
Because people go, why are you doing it?
Yeah.
You can't answer them.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, why are you putting yourself under so much pressure? You can't answer them.
Yeah.
Because we all actually want a peaceful life, but something has come in us and on us that we have to do this. And it's not about self. It is something I believe that God puts in us, on us, so that we can achieve something for the King and the kingdom. But I think we have to be a bit crazy. I mean, I've been told many times I'm crazy, which I might be a little bit. So, well, I know to do what I've done is true. You know, another thing that, you know, I oversee is Grace Foundation, which is working into secular schools and helping turning them around. And, you know, when I started that, I was absolutely crazy. I knew nothing about education. I was pulled down to, obviously, London and DFE a lot. But the issue is now, you know, we're moving towards 20 schools, over 20,000 kids every day. Hearing the kingdom principles about relationships, about that there is a God who cares for them and loves them. They're not a number. And even though they feel rejected, there is a God that doesn't reject them. They're hearing the message constantly.
Yeah.
It's not that we're preaching at them, but I've got, you know, I don't know, nearly 50 workers working in these schools, love Jesus, and they're bringing kingdom goals and principles to a secular society that has very little hope.
Yeah.
That's took 18 years.
Yeah.
But you know, I was thinking about this because we were talking about it the other day and you were mentioning it in one of the talks that you were doing. And I was thinking that, you know, that came from the non-negotiables. That came from, no, this is what God's called us to do and this is what we're going to do. And when people have come to you and said, actually, can you do it a bit differently? Or can you water that bit down? Or can you change that a little bit so it fits in more with our visions and values? You've gone, no, because this is the thing that God's asked us to do.
Yeah, I had that in failure and success.
Yeah.
So like in the beginning, you know, I was taken down to DFE and I was actually, I'm going to say it, I was taken into a corridor and told to lie so that I could keep a couple of academies because they were going to take them off me. And I knew how much we needed to keep those academies. My desire was to keep them. And suddenly I'm in this tension. Lying would be okay. And, you know, I'm not bragging, but I didn't lie. And I remember going back on the train and saying, God, it's really in your hands now.
Yeah.
Because I'm not lying to keep.
Yeah.
You told me to do. And no one took them off us. But I could have lied. I always remember, I can place myself right in that situation, the tension of that moment. And then, now we're successful, I'm told, fantastic. You're doing great things with kids. This is Ofsted. This is DFE. You know, you do it, but could you just take Jesus out of the equation?
Yeah.
Because you only employ Christians. Well, we don't want you to do that. Could you also just keep doing your good stuff, but not do your spiritual stuff? And as Shell said, no. So you say no in failure when you're near failure, and you say no when you're in success. Because sometimes you think everything's going to lead you to greater expansion. It's the truth that sets us free.
Yeah.
It's the truth. And, you know, it is difficult. And there's people, I'm sure, today facing dilemmas where, you know, business or something like that, you know, not telling the whole truth or just kind of like cheating a little bit. I want to encourage everyone, follow the truth, be truthful. It might not pay off in the short term, but it definitely pays off in the long term.
Yeah. Amazing. And just finally, Shell, you know, you lead up the Lions course. So you are always on the hunt for projects and businesses that are kingdom focused.
Yeah.
So tell us, what are you looking for on the Lions course? What kind of thing?
Yeah, first of all, we're looking for people who are entrepreneurial, who have got great ideas and who are kingdom minded.
Yeah.
And they want to use the ideas and the dreams that God has put in their hearts to see God do amazing things in our nation and maybe even beyond. But we're looking for ideas and projects that can impact and can point people to Jesus with a person who's running them that's got what it takes to do it. And we just want to take those people and those projects and help them to become everything that God wants them to be. We don't want to own anything. We don't want to, you know, kind of put ourselves on boards or be trustees or, you know, give loans that we want back. We don't want any of that. We want to release possibility into people and into the projects and the dreams that God has given them to do. And so every year we're on the lookout. You know, the Lions isn't a program that just runs once and then that's it. We run it year on year. And so we're constantly looking for people who have got that passion, who have got that determination, who have got that dream and that unction that God's kind of put in their soul to want to do something amazing for him. And we just want to walk alongside them and support them in that.
Amazing.
Of course, we're taking applications right now.
We are taking applications.
For intake, which we do an intake every January.
Yeah.
Fantastic. It sounds really exciting. I hope that's inspired you guys today, about getting kingdom goals into your business or your project or your charity. And also look at the Lions and see if that's a program for you. Thanks for joining us today, guys. It's been amazing. Stay tuned for the next edition of the podcast. We will see you then.